This is the first Harvest Growth Podcast Christmas special. Today, I interview the narrator of a new Christmas audiobook. He shares snippets from this touching story, and we also discuss how to use Audible as a new way to market your business. It's a way many of you haven't thought of before, and it's a really fun interview. I know you're going to enjoy it.
Are you looking for new ways to make your sales grow? You've tried other podcasts, but they don't seem to know. Harvest the growth potential of your product or service as we share stories and strategies that'll make your competitors nervous. Now, here's the host of the Harvest Growth Podcast, John LeClaire.
Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm really excited to be interviewing one of my favorite people. I have to say that in part because we're related, but also we've been friends for many years. He's my brother-in-law, Brian Boggess. He's also the author of Mountain Philosopher, an online magazine, which I encourage everyone to check out. But today's show, we're going to talk about something I think really unique, but also that I'm excited to share with our audience. And it's about how to post a book onto Audible. So if you're listening and think, hey, I don't have a book, there's nothing I want to share with my audience or whatever, I would encourage you, if you're an inventor, an entrepreneur, a product marketer, any kind of business owner listening to this show, and you don't have a book, a podcast, or an online, an audio book, the process can be pretty simple. And I want to talk about that today with Brian. We're going to share his specific story in a couple of minutes. But as he shares his story, think about how you might publish or promote an audiobook of your own. So I talk to a lot of people like, hey, I'd love to write a book, which I did many years ago. It's a lot of work and I'm not a writer, right? But it's so much easier to do audio in many ways because you could be conversational. It's something you can sit down and give an outline, record it, and you could sell that or promote it on Audible or give it away for free, depending on what your business model is, talking about the category that you are an expert in that fits with your business, for example. It's a great way to really promote your business. So that's the business side of it. We're going to jump in and talk about Brian's specific story and hear how he's promoting his new book that he's bringing out. I call it new. We'll get into the story a little later on. That's another interesting part of this, the story that we'll share as well. But let's jump in. Brian, again, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on here with me.
Thank you, John. It's good to be with you. And again, I know they say you could choose your friends, but not your relatives. But I would have chosen you anyway. So
very kind.
I appreciate you having me on. Excited to talk to you about this.
I'm super excited. So we're going to get into the actual story of the book that you've recorded and put onto Audible in more detail in a minute. But I do want to give the audience kind of a prep of what we're talking about. And then let's get into the Audible process a little bit more. Sure. So this is a book that's in the public domain. So it's old enough. It's over 100 years old. Is that the limit? Is it 100 years?
In countries, it's either 70 years or 80 years after the death of the author, usually is how that works. So in this case, this was published before 1927. The author died, after that, and it's within the public domain now. So
perfect.
100 years is a safe way to look at it. 100 years after death of the author, or 100 years after publication. But you'll want to double check, with each work you're talking about with public domain.
And what's the title of the book?
The title of the book is The Story of the Other Wise Man.
And again, we're going to get into the details of the story in a couple of minutes on the interview, but this is a Christmas-based book, which I'm excited to say, like, this is our first Christmas special on the Harvest Growth Podcast. Should
I put on my Santa hat for you? Would that help?
What a great way to celebrate. It's a great story. Again, we'll get in the synopsis in a second. So you've got this book. It's in the public domain. You've recorded it on your own, got it, professionally mixed, et cetera. And it's going to be, obviously, or it is a great experience for the listener as well, but also a great story. But tell us about the process. So how easy it is, or was it, once you had it recorded, what'd you do next to get it ready for Audible?
Well, first I had to find out for sure that it was in the public domain. And I chose this story, and we'll get into more of that later, but I chose the story because I've had a lifelong love affair with this little book. It's been part of my Christmas celebration for my whole life, right? And so I got this idea a few months ago, and decided, well, what would it take to record an audiobook of that? And so that was step one, is I had to make sure it was public domain, that I didn't, need to deal with a copyright holder. And once I did that, then I started looking through, I actually went to the Audible site, and it referred me to some places. But there's a website called acx.com, and that is where Audible kind of funnels all of its information for those that want to participate in an audiobook. And acx.com has all sorts of resources, not only for writers that want to have their book recorded and released through Audible, but would-be narrators, people who want to be actors on an audiobook, right? Now I'm doing all of it with the exception of the mixing. Luckily, we've got a professional mixer making me sound better than I really am. But the process is, first of all, you have to record the book, right? Record what you're doing, and ACX gives you the highs and the lows of decibel levels you want to be, and it gives you some suggestions. I read a lot about the best way to put together a home studio. I don't have anything nearly as professional as Harvest Growth has. You look fantastic with all of that stuff in the background. Interestingly enough, I did my recording in a closet. In a closet where I had a walk-in closet where I had enough room to set up a little desk, set up my microphone on a boom, and all the clothes in the closet acted as a muffler for both outside sound and echoes. So it was kind of fun putting that together as well.
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quick. So that's actually a great technique that's used by a lot of professional voiceover artists too. So, in our video business, we hire a lot of voiceover artists. And to be honest, not most of them, maybe, I don't know, but a lot of them do that exact technique because, soundproofing you can put on your walls, et cetera, but clothing works extremely well. So the audio quality can be great. Again, an easy way to do it if you're looking to figure out how to get my own recording done and make it sound professional.
Yeah, and I couldn't get my wife to devote any of the rooms in the house that we actually use to make soundproof, right? So the closet worked well for domestic tranquility as well. But once I recorded the book, and I went through a couple of takes and kind of took the best of, if you will, then I sent that to a professional mixer and master person, and she's fantastic, and that's. You could do that on your own, I suppose. The software, Audacity software is what I use, but there are lots of softwares. Supposedly you could figure that out. In my mind, that just seemed really tedious and more than I wanted to do. It made more sense. There's a professional who does this every day. I send it to them, and they mastered it. And then it's a matter of uploading the mastered, completed files through the ACX website to Audible, and they make it really easy. That ACX website gives you so much information, almost overkill of information, but it really gives you step-by-step directions how to upload your files once they're ready. And then after about a week or so of review by Audible, well, it just happens to be up on Audible's catalog. So it's much easier than I expected it would be. I expected it would be tougher. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of it, so you could do this pretty inexpensively, right? So if you've got business owners that are on a budget, a little bit of equipment, a nice microphone, like you said, in a closet recording, and even a master mixer, it doesn't have to be that expensive, right? Finding a freelancer that can do some of that work for you, you can keep your budget fairly low for this process.
Absolutely, and I think my whole home studio, microphone, good headphones, a boom for the microphone, because I tend to use my hands a lot, as you can already tell. I think I put the whole studio together for under $200.
Yeah.
Using a laptop that I was already using for something else. It's not much to get really high quality sound.
Perfect. All right. So now it's on Audible, and I want to send people to find that book. So again, the title of the book is The Story of the Other Wise Man, because it's not out of print. It's in public domain, right? So because it's in public domain, there are a couple others on there that are kind of low quality, been on there for a little while. obviously check out Brian's, and just when you search on Audible, Brian Boggess, and all this is in the show notes as well as a reminder, but on Audible, look for The Story of the Other Wise Man, and then find the book from Brian Boggess. If you've got an Audible subscription, it's part of the plan. Just download it right away, or you can obviously purchase it as well. So let's jump into the story a little bit. So tell us, for our audience's benefit, if they haven't heard of it, or if they haven't heard the story for a while, what's it about?
Well, it was written by Henry Van Dyke, who was he was a writer, a minister, kind of a Renaissance man in the late 1800s, and it's the story of the fourth wise man. Everybody in the Christmas story talks about the three wise men that came and visited the baby Jesus, or the young child Jesus, and brought the gold and frankincense and myrrh. Well, this is the story of their friend who was supposed to meet them when they started their journey to follow the star. Okay, it's fictional. We actually, historically, we don't know how many wise men there actually were, and frankly, there were probably some wise women that brought more practical gifts than gold and frankincense and myrrh. But the story, it talks about a man named Artaban, okay, who is this fourth wise man. And Artaban has been watching the stars with his three friends, and they're magi, they're followers of Zoroaster somewhere in Persia. And he becomes convinced that the sign is being given that the King of the Jews is about to be born. And so he sells everything he has and buys three great gifts: a ruby, a sapphire, and a pearl. Okay, and he intends to take those three gifts to the king, to this child when he gets there. Well, one thing after another happens, and he gets diverted from his quest. He has a 10-day ride from where his home is to where he's supposed to meet his companions, and he gets within 3 hours of that and comes upon a dying man in the road. And he's got 3 hours still to ride before midnight when they're going to leave. But he knows if he leaves this man, the man's going to die, right? So he wrestles with himself. Finally, he stops and he nurses this man to health through the night. Well, he gets back on his horse the next morning and goes to the meeting place, and his companions are gone. And they've left him a note saying, follow us, come on. But, he's got a spent horse. He's got no food and water. And so unfortunately, he has to sell one of his gifts to buy a pack of camels and to set out across. Well, he gets to Bethlehem, and he gets there too late. The child and his family have left. Well, I don't want to tell the whole story, but the point is, it's his quest to find the king, and everywhere he goes, he's always just a little bit behind until the very end. And it's a very touching thing. He actually happens to be in Jerusalem when Jesus is about to be crucified. And at that point, he still has one of his great jewels, one of his gifts. But again, he's presented with a choice. Does he use the gift to help somebody, or does he save it and try and find the king? And he makes the right choice. Okay, he never does find the king, but at the very end of his life, the king finds him. And it's really just one of the most touching stories. I grew up hearing my grandmother tell the story every Christmas, and she was a very talented performer, and she the voices and the cadences and just the focus on the beauty of the language just really touched me. And then my mother did the same thing when my grandma was taken too early. And I guess this is my chance to pick up the baton and tell the story a little bit more technologically than my grandma or mom did, and to share it with a wider audience. It's just a beautiful story.
It is. And it's a great Christmas story that I think a lot of people haven't heard of or haven't listened to. Back in the day, as you mentioned, it's a very old story. So I think it was very popular for a long period of time, but less so, just less known now. But it's a great story that I encourage everyone to certainly check out on Audible. And again, a reminder, it's The Story of the Other Wise Man. And Brian Boggess is the not the author, but the reader of this.
The narrator or the performer. Yeah.
There you go.
It's interesting, John. Part of the reason why I decided to do this is I listened to the other audiobooks and I just was saddened by how they were butchered. I mean, good voices, all of that sort of stuff, but just missed the soul of the book. And that's what I tried to convey with my narration.
And I just completed another podcast interview, which will be published later, with with an inventor who he talked about how he's like, I wasn't really an inventor. I took an existing technology and I improved it and took it to a new market, which I'm like, that is invention, right? And we'll get to that story later on, but this is very similar, right? So if anyone has the curiosity even to do this, if you always dreamt of doing an audiobook, find a book that's in public domain. So if it's, I can't encourage this audience anymore to create, your own story about your expertise to drive business, right? So to help that. Beyond that, though, too, if you've got a fun story that's pretty old and you'd love to share it, it's a pretty easy way to go, relatively speaking. Takes a lot of work to get it done, but it's something that anybody can do, right? With the right coaching and process.
And here's something interesting. I'm sure you're on top of this, but I don't know if your audience knows this. In 2021, the audiobook market in the United States was $1.6 billion. That's a sizable market. Yeah. When you figure we're talking $10, $15 a pop, that's a lot of audiobooks. And a lot of those are in the cheaper side of things. Mine is priced a lot cheaper than that, but that's a huge market, and it's growing dramatically every year.
Yep.
People aren't sitting down and reading books as much as they used to, but they always have their phones with them, and they're listening increasingly to audiobooks, and so it's kind of an exciting, growing market to be a part of.
Agreed, absolutely. I think it's a phenomenal opportunity as well, and this is certainly a fun story. Brian, is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to share with our audience?
I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and wish John and the LeClaire family and the Harvest Growth family all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you and yours. And we certainly wish our audience a very Merry Christmas as well this Christmas season. And what a great way to celebrate. Check out Brian's book on Audible. Again, the details are all in the show notes. And please, if you have any questions, reach out to us in our show as well at harvestgrowth.com, where you can find this and other podcasts as well. Brian, thanks again.
Hey, thank you, John.